Welcome to Creative Love Radio with Debbie and Dr. Rob. We are redefining relationships to guide you to greater love, more success, and living your purpose through the latest research in neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Eastern wisdom. Get ready for another inspirational episode of Creative Love Radio. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creative Love Radio on the video version. If you are listening to us on the podcast, go to YouTube and you will have a link to our YouTube page where you can actually see us live if you'd rather look at our pretty faces. But we thought we'd show you our a face to the voices here. Are you excited today, Rob, for our topic?
I am. It's my favorite topic. Again, now this is really my favorite topic.
How to be spiritual.
How to be spiritual in the material world.
Yes.
And
when you're a material girl.
Yeah, because we all have bodies. That's how we exist in the world. And therefore, we have to understand that duality of, who am I?
And this question came up a number of times on our Facebook posts. We just did a Facebook Live this week, and a lot of people were asking, like, how do I keep my spiritual life and my material life, and how do I work together to integrate them, and how do I keep focused on my spiritual life and not get caught up in the material? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so the problem is that we have a spiritual life or an idea of spirituality in our life, and then we feel like we have to kind of reserve our meditation time or our visualization time or devotional time. And then when we go to the world, it's how does that integrate? It's just like we forget that we're spiritual and we're just kind of battering around as humans and getting angry and having all these human emotions. And how can we have a cohesive experience that spirituality can carry us throughout our day?
Right. I think a useful way to think about it and to talk about it is in context of career, because we all have to work. We all have to choose a career. And in Jungian spiritual psychology, the main idea is that we start to identify with a persona in our careers. So we start to think we are the uniform, that we are the mask that we wear in order, when we go out there into the world, we have to interact with the world. And Jung had this idea of the persona as a mask, a mask that helps us interface with that world so that we can function in it. So there's nothing wrong. He didn't see it as something we need to get rid of, but that we need to understand, because when we over-identify with that persona, we start to play out what we call a shadow career. A shadow career means that we end up doing things that are contrary to our true nature, contrary to our calling and what we're meant to do in this world.
So just to clarify too, this idea, the persona is driven by the ego, which a lot of people have heard the word ego. And the ego, in the way we teach, is not a bad thing. It's something that helped us survive. It's really the controller of our conditioning. We hear the word like our conditioning and our defense mechanisms and our coping mechanisms, we should say, rather than defenses. But so we have this kind of, we call it the survival kit that we go to life with, and the persona is part of that. But we tend to forget that that there's another part of us. And before we even became egos, or that ego emerged, we had a spiritual center, our pure nature. And then we get into the world, and it kind of builds up all these based on our experience of how to cope and how to survive in the world. We create the mask. And then that's the career that we choose is based on that conditioning. It's based on, what did my parents say I should do? What my parents thought, what my culture thought was appropriate. Is everyone in the family doctors and lawyers, or is everyone in the family working class? Do people go to college? Did they not? Is it okay for a woman to have a career? Should she, is the woman's place should be in the home, barefoot and pregnant? How are we raised? And all those ideas, how are they kind of controlling unconsciously now our experience in the world?
Right. And I remember I used to find these jobs that were completely the opposite of what I needed to be doing and what I wanted to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jung explains that whatever we push away into the shadow, we tend to attract into our life. So I would push away bureaucracy, paperwork, that kind of very structured, controlled environment. And sure enough, that's what I would end up creating for myself. I would end up in these jobs that were very controlled environments, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, and of course, I was triggered all the time.
Mm.
But when you understand what's happening, that these are shadow aspects of your mind, that they're arising so that you can work with them, now you can take advantage of those situations. They become your way of freeing your mind.
And for me, I pushed away male dominance.
Ah.
So every job I had was all, men, male bosses that were very dominant and criticizing, never appreciative. And then really this idea that I held, it wasn't that it was no one told me that men were dominant, but it was my interpretation of me growing up in the household I grew up in, stay-at-home mom. And this idea that I wanted to be free of that, but I couldn't be free of it because I was pushing it away. So I kept, whatever job I was in, it was like that same boss that didn't appreciate me, that wouldn't let me have power, that wouldn't hear my voice. And then I had this other dream of becoming a writer and doing something more creative, but I didn't feel like I didn't have belief that I can have that. So it was almost like my ego was based on survival. I needed that paycheck, and I kept staying in those jobs, my shadow career, in order to avoid really having what I really wanted. And so our ego starts to create this world that's limited, and we believe then that the world is limited. So the material world out there is I believed was telling me there's no place for me as a woman. I can't make money doing what I love. And so if that's what I believed, that's what I would see reflected back. And so this idea, though, that where's the spirituality? Where is that beautiful spirit that we came into the world with that got cloaked with all this limitation?
Right. Yeah, a lot of people ask, why would I create these shadowy careers for myself? And it has to do with our ego and our persona, like we were saying. So we can think of the ego as our internal process of observing the world, and it gives us that sense of I, so that we can survive. The persona is what we choose to present to the world. Now, in constructing the persona, we have to make choices about who we want to present ourselves as. In other words, we have to define who we are to others and say, this is who I am. These are the qualities of my persona, my personality, in a sense. In choosing that, we have to reject certain traits as well. So if you think about what are the opposites of my persona, of my personality, all those go into the shadow. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a natural process that our psyche creates the persona. But in creating the shadow, that is, in pushing certain things away, we're giving it power, and it's going to be projected outward. So pretty soon what we are seeing in the world is our shadow, the things that we've rejected. But because nobody explains these things to us, and we think, oh, it's just accident, it's just fate that I end up in these situations, I can't work with it. I think they're external to me, therefore I can't work with them. But as soon as I understand, oh, it's my own mind that I'm seeing, and these creations, these job situations, these relationships are essentially arising from my own mind, now I can work with it because I'm seeing them for what they truly are.
And so the question was, how do we become spiritual in a material world? So we need to know what we're not, what's the ego. We need to understand the ego to understand our spiritual life.
Absolutely.
And because it's really like we live in the physical world, which is dual in nature. It doesn't mean that you can't have one half of anything. And so, it's a way for us to, our spiritual self, to see ourselves in a physical. You need the kind of the opposite to kind of mirror back to you. So if you understand that this ego that we have is also a part of our spiritual expression, it's just a kind of a small part of it. It's inclusive of it. And I think
Right.
a lot of people misunderstand that. They think, well, there's the ego and then there's the spiritual self, that's me. And we got to get rid of the ego because the spiritual self is where all the power is. And I just want to push my ego away. And that's actually the wrong attitude, because then we end up kind of everything that we're repressing is going to still show up for us. And so
Mm-hmm.
what we want to do is see that the ego is our friend. It kept us alive. It helped us cope in this crazy world when we were kids, like we're this tiny being, and we had to kind of learn how to like negotiate kindergarten, and and junior high was crazy too, like how all those hormones. And so we needed an ego, because if we didn't have an ego, how would we survive that social experiment that we are put ourselves in? But then at midlife, after 30, we start to realize that, okay, thank you, ego, very much. But now there's more to me. So it serves a purpose. And in Jungian psychology, there's a time to individuate from it. Individuation from ego doesn't mean getting rid of it, though. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
misunderstand that too. They think, I'm going to let the ego go. What you're going to do is to live a spiritual life in a material world is you're actually moving the center of control and power from the ego to your higher self, your spiritual self. The ego, it still needs to play a role because you have a body that you have to, and your senses and all those things, but it doesn't have to lead or drive your life anymore.
That's true. Yeah. So in a spiritual psychology, the ego is serving the higher self
Mm-hmm.
instead of the other way around. If you think of the ordinary person, their ego is driving the ship, and the higher self is kind of in the back seat or forgotten. It's not playing a big role in their life. What we want to do in a spiritual psychology is bring the self to the forefront and act out of that higher purpose in us. The ego then serves its purpose simply as making sure that we survive and keep, and it kind of warns us about situations and keeps us surviving and keeps us alive.
Carl Jung says that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will affect our life and direct it,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll think it's fate. And so when we're not aware of our ego, we think that's all we are. And then there's a spiritual realm somewhere in the mystical sense that we can access maybe one day. We kind of lose sight of that. And so what to understand the ego is we have to understand how it's defending us, and like you talked about, the shadow. What is in the shadow that we are that's influencing our life? And so I want to give an example, because this stuff is very deep and profound and philosophical, so we want to bring it down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for example, this is very common with people, is that you have a persona that wants to please. You want people to like you, right? We all have that to some extent. Some people more than others. I think I have it more than you. But the unconscious, so what we repress, or what the shadow self, is that person that everyone doesn't like. So it's the mean person, and you have to look at what qualities did you not like as a child in your family and the people around you that you disliked, and you never want to be like them. So you put that in the shadow. So your behaviors, your decisions, everything in life is about keeping that everyone liking me and me not being the bad person. So I want to be the nice person, and then the bad person goes in the shadow. So you get to work, you decide that you deserve more at your job, but you're afraid to like tell your boss, because you don't want them to not like you. You don't want to seem like ungrateful. You don't want to lose your job. So you start to act in that limited way, and you forget that it's your ego that's kind of getting in the way of you fully expressing yourself. And so when you see that and you understand, oh, it's me, not my fear of not being liked is really holding me back, you have to face it.
Mm-hmm.
And they say it's hard to face your shadow. So for someone to face not being liked feels like death to them. Like the ego's whole job is to keep you socialized with everyone and fitting in and surviving. And so there's this kind of like a visceral feeling of disappointing someone. And so we have to face that. We have to be willing to face that fire in order to gain our spiritual power. Otherwise, the ego is just kind of keeping everything in that limited way. And then we never really get to express who we really are. So are we really that persona that we put on the show for everyone to like us?
Right.
And deep inside, we're resenting them and we're frustrated and we're mad because we can't have what we want, and making our boss wrong, right? For not giving us that raise or not choosing us to get that promotion, right? And then we realize, oh, it's me creating it. And then all of a sudden, when you start to turn inward and see that kind of how your mind is creating this, that's really where you start to see your spiritual power, because then you can choose. You could choose, you know what, I really don't want to ask my boss because I don't want to do it. I don't want that promotion. And it's a choice. Or you let the ego's conditioning do it for you. And then you blame the world and blame the person. And, that person out there is bad. And I'm the good person. I'm the good employee. And I don't get what I want.
No.
So it really is a way to reclaim your power and have the choice. And so that's where the ego, it can still be there, but you don't have to let it make the choices anymore.
Right,
and
right.
So that's really kind of an example of how that goes.
Well, I remember my own experience, and when I would find myself in those triggered situations where I hated my job and I hated my supervisors and my bosses. You
Those
have
bad people.
Yeah, you have a choice, right? Are you going to let it squelch your dreams and just say, that's just the way my life turned out, and I give up. I'm just going to stick it out and survive this. Or do you say, no, I'm going to use this as inspiration to really find my purpose, right? Because it's so uncomfortable that it's lighting a fire under you and it's prompting you to do something.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I said, I'm not going to let this beat me. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to use it to inspire me and push me towards what I really want to do. And, I would work at nights and go to school in days during the day, and my eyes would be all red because I wasn't getting any sleep. But I had that uncomfortable feeling that I knew that if I go back there, I'm just going to be miserable all my life. And that's not acceptable to me. I need to have a beautiful life, like the artist said. And you do what you need to do, whatever you have to do to make it happen.
What's really important, what you just said, is this idea that you use it as an opportunity. And it's very true. Those people, those mean men that I used to work for, were actually reflecting back where my own stuckness, my own limitations. So when we ever have an obstacle and we want to make it out there, it's really an opportunity. It's almost like they're our best friends, like you say. They're reflecting back our own mind. And so they're playing a very critical role in helping us become our true self. So relationships, every bad boyfriend or girlfriend you've had, ex-wife, ex-husband, person that cheated on you, all of them were reflecting something in you that you got wrapped up in that situation, because we fit together like puzzle pieces with situations and people in our life that are always reflecting our mind. And so again, to become spiritual in a human life in the material world is to become aware of the power to create, and that everything's reflective of our mind, that everything we see is us in a way. And so it's sometimes not a direct reflection. Like, I'm not a mean man, but actually I was being mean. I would be mean to myself because I never stood up. And then that frustration would build. And again, it really, thank God that I didn't have great bosses, because I would have been happy being in my corporate job. And actually, right before I got laid off and became a hypnotherapist, I had a very comfortable job. My boss is actually really nice to me and very supportive. And then all of a sudden he gave me a bad review. And I was like, what's going on here? Because I had really decided that this is comfortable enough. And as soon as I decided that, it was like everything started to change. And
Right.
and it was like kind of like you say, that divine discomfort is like pushing us. And so we have to remember that everything that's showing up for us is for us to remember our spiritual self, our true self, not the conditioned ego. And that's how you can really live a spiritual life in the material world.
Yeah. So spiritual psychology is actually showing us that what we are experiencing in our everyday life right now, not sometime in the future, is fuel for the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's fuel for our personal spiritual growth. So you don't have to wait to go to Tibet or to go to India to practice yoga and be enlightened. All you have to do is face your obstacles right now.
Mm-hmm.
The obstacle is the way. And
Yes.
it becomes a way to free our mind.
I love that. And I think that we have to remember too that the material world isn't the end goal. The real goal in life is to know who we really are. And it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy the material world, that we can have beautiful sex and beautiful relationships and beautiful success, money, abundance, living our dreams, writing beautiful books and movies and all the creative arts that people want to do and create and enjoy all that. But that's the tools that we use to become and be aware of our true spiritual nature. And that is, if you put the spiritual nature and understanding that's who you are as the goal, and use those things that you want in the material world as the tools, that's really where your life starts to shift. What most people do is they use the spiritual work to get the material things, right? They're like, let me meditate and get a peace of mind so I can manifest money, or so I can manifest this other opportunity, or so I can create love in my life. But you're actually doing it backwards. You're actually you're making the material world so much bigger than your spiritual self. And so are you a slave to the material world? Or is the material world a slave to you? Not a slave in a way, but serving you. And so there's this old quote from the Bible is, you can't serve two gods, right? Don't have other God before me. And what that means is that we have to remember our true nature is spiritual above the material, but it doesn't mean we can't have, like, we don't have to denounce or renounce wealth or sex or love and all and delicious food, but it's putting it at its right place.
Absolutely. That's it.
So great topic today. Do you have any last words, or was that enough to get people going? And so the next obstacle that shows up in your life, say, what is this showing me about my mind? What is my persona want? What is my ego wanting? What is it attached to? And then look at the opposite. What is it afraid of? What is this bringing up? What fear is this obstacle bringing up that I don't want to face, that I want to push away? And then if you face that fear and realize that it's not real, you really kind of examine it. And if you understand yourself as a spiritual being that's unlimited, why would you be afraid of it? You start questioning the fear, and then that's really where you free your mind.
Right. So we invite you to give us feedback and tell us what topics you'd like to hear more about. We'd love to hear from you and get some ideas. And thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your listening to us on our podcast and on these videos. So we'll see you next time.
Yes. And visit us on Creative Love Community, our Facebook group, where you can ask us questions. And we'll be doing some Facebook Lives coming up. We'll announce those. So be sure to be in that group so you can get the latest and catch us live and interact with us and ask us questions. And we hope to see you soon.
Take care. Much love.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to Creative Love Radio with Debbie and Dr. Rob. For more information, visit us on our website at creativelove.com.